In this video, I want to take a look at an unfortunate situation that I've seen arise from time to time, in fact quite regularly, particularly in workplaces, or obviously in workplaces which have a trade union, where there's a trade union representation. I'll do that right after this. Okay, I was approached not too long ago by a lady who had suffered a lot of bullying in the workplace. The employer was a large Irish employer, and she had suffered bullying for a number of years. Eventually she had enough and made a formal complaint. It took a lot of guts in the particular circumstances that she found herself in, but she had enough essentially and decided she'd bring a formal complaint. When she did that, then the usual dignity at work policy or procedure was invoked in the workplace, which was fair enough. And the alleged bully and my client both had representation. But the difficulty was that both employees are members of the same trade union. So clearly this would pose a problem for most representatives or representative organizations. For example, if it was a solicitor, the solicitor couldn't act for two different people in a conflict situation. A solicitor can't act for two different people in a conveyance, for example, even if the conveyance was one where perhaps a father or a mother or a parent is transferring a site to a child to build a house or whatever. Solicitor can't act on both sides. That's pretty obvious in a conflict situation where there's going to be a conflict of evidence, a conflict about the circumstances and the facts and so on. So in this particular situation, eventually the employee decided, with the help of the union person, that they were going to bring a claim to the Workplace Relations Commission to bring the thing to another level, as it were, and to have the allegation of bullying fully ventilated, and essentially to have her voice heard and have her story told. And the day before the hearing was to go ahead, the union representative contacted her and told her that he had no choice but to pull her claim from the WRC because of, I can't remember the exact reason. It may have been insufficient evidence, it may have been a time issue, it may have been something else, but the suspicion for my client was certainly that it may have been something to do with a potential conflict in the workplace which the union faced in representing one employee against another in circumstances where the union represented both employees and both employees were members of the union. The suspicion, as I say, particularly my client, was that the union essentially decided, for, let's call it, political reasons, not to progress, and the thing didn't go ahead. Not long after that, then, I was approached by other employees in a workplace where they were agency workers, and they were members of the union as well. And it appeared that in the workplace, the work that they were doing was going to be, jobs were going to become available for that type of work. And the agency workers, understandably, rather than continuing to work on agency contracts, would have leaped at the opportunity to apply directly to the place where they were already working. But it appeared then that the union in question had done a deal with the employer a number of years ago to set up a panel of workers, from which panel any new jobs would be filled. This caused my clients great difficulty because They were agency workers. They weren't internal. They weren't on the panel, even though they are members of the trade union, and even though they were hoping and praying to get an opportunity to apply for these jobs, it appeared that they were frozen out in the cold. They did place great reliance on their union representative, and the response that they received wasn't entirely satisfactory to them. In fact, they felt that they really weren't getting any representation, and they felt that only the people on the panel who were also union members were going to have an opportunity to go for these jobs. Now, even though they're agency workers and they should have been notified about any availability of jobs in the workplace, that's the law essentially, or one of the protections for agency workers. Their trade union representative wasn't putting forward their case. In fact, didn't do a good job for them at all. In fact, failed to represent them, quite frankly. There's no point beating around the bush about it. So these two instances gave rise then to me considering the whole situation. I've seen it many, many times, but essentially the union in question, with the best will in the world, had a conflict. It had a conflict between the rights of one individual and the rights of other individuals. But all of these individuals were in the same trade union. So there's going to be a difficulty there in terms of representation. Who does the union represent? Now, if the union is representing all of the workers against the employer in respect of working conditions or pay or annual leave or any other conditions, terms and conditions which might improve the employee's lot, that's excellent. That's very good. Clearly, there's no issue there in respect of a conflict of interest. For example, the workers or the pilots working for Ryanair have eventually got union recognition and eventually got to the point where Ryanair are going to deal with their trade union in respect of working conditions, etc., etc. That's all very well, but the difficulty arises in the two situations that I've outlined where the union actually represented both sides of an argument, both sides of a conflict. And in those circumstances, clearly there is a conflict of interest insofar as who does the union represent to the best of its ability and how do they decide. If you are dealing with a solicitor on the other hand and he is charging you a fee and you're paying him, essentially he's going to represent you to the best of his ability. Now, he or she is not going to have a conflict of interest, or certainly shouldn't have, because if that arose, he's leaving himself open to the allegation of professional negligence. He's leaving himself open to being reported to his professional body, the Law Society of Ireland, and all sorts of ramifications, legal action for negligence or professional negligence, etc. So whatever you might think about the mercenary nature of an employer, of a solicitor being able to represent, for example, both the employer and an employee in different circumstances, there is something fairly straightforward and fairly plain about the essentially mercenary nature of being able to pay a professional who will represent your interests to the very best of his or her ability, notwithstanding what position you find yourself in, or notwithstanding whatever issue you might have or whatever difficulty you might find yourself in. Now, obviously, solicitors and barristers represent their clients to the best of their ability all the time, and they don't make moral judgments about the guilt or innocence of their clients. They simply do the best in terms of providing them with a defence in a criminal case or advancing their cause of action in a civil litigation case or personal injury, whatever. But I think you'd have to agree with me that there is something pretty straightforward. There's something actually quite magisterial about the very straightforward mercenary relationship between paying a solicitor to represent you and getting that representation, and the difficulty if you have a conflict or an issue in the workplace and you are getting union representation, because there would be a possibility that, like the cases I've discussed in this video and other cases that I come across regularly, there is always the potential for a conflict of interest. And it's very, very straightforward. If both workers in a conflict of sexual harassment allegation, bullying allegation, discrimination allegation in the workplace, there's going to be a conflict of evidence, there's going to be a conflict of facts, there's going to be something at issue between those two employees. And yet, if both of those employees are members of the same trade union, how do they get real representation to represent each's interests and their interests alone? Hope you find this video useful, and hope it gives you some food for thought. If you're interested, you might be interested in signing up or subscribing to my YouTube channel, and you might give my video a thumbs up if you find it useful. Thanks for watching.